how is it possible to go from ancient Judaism to Gnosticism? Because many scholars, myself included, think that Gnosticism grew from Jewish soil. It was then kind of grafted into Jewish Christianity and then slipped into mainstream Christianity, became a dominant competing religious force with the mainstream churches in the 2nd century. But how did that happen? How do you go from, Yahweh being the God of creation and covenant and the deliverer of Israel to all of a sudden becoming Yod-Baoth in the Valentinian system, this ignorant, insolent, and malevolent deity from whom people need deliverance from? I mean, how does that happen? Well, in this short video, that's what I'm going to try explain. How can we imagine Gnosticism growing out of a Jewish context, a Jewish worldview, and becoming the system broadly, diversely understood that was Gnosticism? Now you might be saying, but how could that happen? How do you get from reading the book of Genesis to something like the Apocryphon of John, or the Gospel of Jesus, or the Gospel of Judas, or the Gospel of Truth? How do you get from A to B? Well, I want you to think of a thought experiment for a moment, okay? I want you to have this thought experiment with me. Think about the Jews living in Alexandria in the 1st and 2nd centuries, and think of all the things that they've been through, okay? They've experienced various pogroms and persecutions in the 30s of the 1st century, especially when Caligula was planning to put a statue of himself in the Holy of Holies in the Jerusalem temple. There were anti-Jewish riots in Alexandria. Then finally, you've got the Judean War in 66 to 70, which is a massive upheaval. And again, Jews in Alexandria really had a hard time for that. There's another revolt in 115 to 17 in Cyrenaica, Cyprus, and Egypt. Again, a massive persecution of Jews, riots, a lot of anti-Semitic rhetoric going on. And then you've got another big anti-Roman rebellion in Judea in 132 to 135, the Bar Kokhba revolt. And so it's a really tumultuous time, this 100 years, and it's really not healthy or safe to be a Jew in the East at this time. So if that's what you've been going through, well, what are the options? Well, you could be someone like Josephus, who simply says, well, yeah, I'm Jewish, but as I read the tea leaves, it looks like God has gone over to the side of the Romans, and God is effectively a Roman. I mean, he's still the God of our covenant, but God has put the Romans in charge as masters of the world. Another option would be you could simply apostatize, abandon Judaism, become a Greek. In fact, Philo's nephew, Tiberius Alexander, he did exactly that. He effectively became a Greek, and he had a very high and important position in the Flavian regime, around 70 AD. He was one-time governor of Judea as well. Another option may be join this rogue messianic sect called Christians. I mean, hide amongst a bit of Gentiles. You've got some quasi-Jewish beliefs, if you like. So go join this sort of, new messianic movement that seems to be doing the rounds in some of the cities of the Eastern Mediterranean. Maybe you could align yourself with a burgeoning rabbinic movement, which tries to reconstruct and pick up the pieces of Judaism post 135. But another option would be to completely reconfigure your doctrine of God. Engage in a radical reading of the Torah to explain why all of this bad stuff has happened to the Jewish people. Maybe with Yahweh, the God of Israel, cast as the villain, and then use Plato to provide you with the props and the tools to imagine a new universe with a new God who wants to get you out of this crazy world. Imagine some Jewish intellectuals have done this kind of, Jewish deconstruct and using the tools of Greek philosophy, but they're still reading the book of Genesis. They're still thinking about a God who wants to get them out of this world, rather than a God who brings, weal and woe, to use the language of Isaiah. Now imagine a group of Jewish Christians begins to meet and mingle with Jewish intellectuals like that in Alexandria, okay? And then Jewish Christians start grafting some of this ideology, this radical theocosmology, into their own narratives about Jesus. And remember, too, in Jewish Christian circles, you have a prophetic tradition, you know? You've got Philip's daughters who are prophets. You've got Agabus in Acts 13 in Antioch. He's a prophet. John the Seer of Patmos. So you've got this prophetic tradition within Jewish Christianity, and maybe people start speaking on behalf of the living Jesus, talking about new revelations, new secret teaching that aligns with this sort of, deconstructed Platonic Judaism that Jewish Christians are encountering. Maybe this explains what we have in the Gospel of Thomas, and these ideas are being spliced into Christianity, and thus it begins to develop the first steps, the first building blocks, if you like, towards the system that we call Gnosticism. And we could further show the historical plausibility of that by noting that Valentinus and Basilides were both alleged to have come from Egypt. And if you read your Bible, you could think of some reasons why that might be compelling. You know, think of Galatians 4, where Paul warns Gentiles that if they abandon his gospel and they go back to observing the law as a means of attaining grace, Paul says that's effectively like going back to the slavery of pagan religion. And then you're under the sway of various gods and powers. I mean, that's effectively what he says to Gentiles. I mean, going to Torah observance to find your identity and salvation, that's like going back to the slavery of pagan religion all over again. You know, if you read it like that way, there's another reason for maybe wondering if the God of the Old Testament is a good God. I mean, you at least know where someone like Marcion was coming from. Or take another infamous verse, John 8:44, where Jesus says to his Judean interlocutors, he says, your father the devil. This is an infamous slogan in the history of Christianity and its relationship with Judaism. But in that verse, you normally take it as Jesus saying, look, you're not the children of my father, the God of Israel, Yahweh, you're children of the devil. But what if someone says or someone thinks, maybe Yahweh and the devil are not separate people. Maybe they're one and the same. If Jews are the children of Yahweh, and if they are also children of the devil, maybe the devil and Yahweh are one and the same. You could see someone reading John 8:44, very difficult text, might take that position. Or else think about, the references to mystery in the New Testament. Jesus talks about the mystery of the kingdom has been given to the disciples, but he never really spells out what it is. So maybe people could speculate as to what it is. Or Paul's always talking about the mystery at the end of Romans and Colossians and Ephesians. Maybe this mystery is about how in this world we're suffering under the travails of a wicked demiurge, a horrible and malevolent and crafter of the universe, but there's another God who's going to save that, and our souls can finally ascend and return back to the pleroma, the fullness of the heavenly realm from which we came and to which we truly belong. Now, this is all speculative in some sense, but it's got a little bit of plausibility to it for the reasons I've largely set out. So there is a way to imagine how Gnosticism may have emerged in Jewish circles and then migrated into Jewish Christianity, where it continued to grow, develop, and become the systems that we find amongst these Sethians, the Basilidean teachers, Valentinus, and others. But yeah, it does require a radical reordering of your doctrine of God to go from Yahweh being the God of Israel to Yahweh being the bad guy. But, maybe such things happened. So all things being equal, I'm inclined to prefer a Jewish provenance for the origins of Gnosticism. But I have to point out it is disputed. And all the ideas of Gnosticism, what it is, where it came from, they're also disputed. And there's a lot of scholarly speculation that goes on here. Hi everyone, thank you for watching this video on how Gnosticism may have emerged from Judaism, given what we know about events in the first century. If you like this video, then you may also enjoy other programs, other videos on the channel. There's a lot, you can check them out in your own time. And if you're enjoying the content, please like, subscribe, share, leave a comment or a question, and I'll do my best to get back to you. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you around the channel.